The most polluted, toxic place in America is on a small corner of northeast Oklahoma called Tar Creek. Quapaw Indians were the first people on this land in 1834. The Quapaw Indians are original people of Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, and Tennessee. The Quapaw tribe was forced to move to Indian Territory in the late 1800s, along with many other tribes.
At one time, there were tens of thousands of Quapaw, but by the time they reached Oklahoma, there was only a few families left. They were given this small little patch in northeast Oklahoma as a reservation. And then in the early 1900s, 1902, 1905, they discovered lead and zinc on the reservation.
Many Quapaw tribal members refused to lease their land to the mining companies. For the companies, a fortune was at stake, so they tried to acquire mining leases through the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs.
The BIA went to Congress and had individual tribal members declared incompetent so they could sign mining leases on their behalf. So in early 1900s, they started mining for lead and zinc on the Quapaw tribe's reservation.
And after this news got out, it didn't take long for people to flock to this area, Tar Creek.
It was like OKC or Tulsa at the time. It was a massive boomtown, and it set that region. That's why northeast Oklahoma, southwest Missouri, and southeast Kansas is the way it is because of the mining, tri-state mining area.
Picher incorporated on March 1918. Its name was given by Mr. O. Picher, who drilled and found the first deep water well for the town. Population then peaked at over 14,000.
Picher processed nearly 181 million tons of ore, and the leftovers were piled into Chat Mountains outside the mine. Over time, a 7,000-acre ridgeline was built up with chat piles as high as 300 feet.
During the mining boom, at least 13,000 people worked in the mines. The mining slowed down around the early 1930s. Population began to go down as well. In 1940, there was 5,848, and by 1960, population dwindled down to just over 2,500, and that includes Picher and sister cities Cardin, Oklahoma, and Trace, Kansas.
The lead found in Picher in 1914 was just in time for World War I to spur boosted demand for ammunition. The town supplied more than half of the bullets fired in the war. Soon, there were thousands of people working in the Picher mining field.
From 1917 to 1947, Picher was the most productive mining field in the tri-state area. Back in 1927, there were 248 mills operating in the Picher field area. Until the late 1930s, centralized milling resulted in mill consolidation, and all mining came to a stop in 1967.
The mining companies abandoned Picher to deal with the impact of its industrial abuse. 14,000 mine shafts were deserted, and 30 chat piles weighing 178 million tons were left behind.
Then, since the mining stopped, they also stopped pumping water out of mines. That caused mines to fill with water, 76,000 gallons of toxic water underground.
When the mining stopped, they filled up with water, and the chemistry of the water is so that it turns water acidic, and then it starts bubbling up to the surface when we have a lot of rain. It's called acid mine drainage. This acid mine drainage then gets into the natural creek and basically creates rust and kills out all the fish. There's like one catfish and one sucker or something that can survive in this creek, Tar Creek.
In the 70s, children would go to the swimming hole and go home with an orange coloration. It was just passed off as sunburn, but it was actually arsenic-contaminated water.
And they took close to 200 million tons of rock out of the underground. The tailings that they left behind were piled up on the surface. Now it just looks like a moonscape with all these huge tailings piles called chat.
300-foot chat piles surrounding the city with a scary existence. Oklahoma wind constantly blows toxic chat around, polluting the air. But people didn't always know that the chat was toxic.
So Pitcher was one of the towns we played in on a regular basis, and so we knew people there and grew up going into the chat piles, running quads on the chat piles and stuff like that. And then hear stories about mining. Anybody that grows up in that area, especially that has a family history, has some kind of story, whether it ties back to the mines or Mickey Mantle and stuff like that.
The chat piles weigh 170 million tons. All that came out from underground and was just piled up on the surface. That is what causes the cave-ins. Cave-ins are extremely dangerous. The whole town can just cave into the earth. Also, know this: if you drive along the roads in Picher, you are literally driving on top of mines.
The discarded mining tunnels created massive sinkholes that collapsed houses and streets.
In 1983, the Picher area became part of the EPA's Superfund Site program. The land was too toxic to inhabit. Picher was number 1 on that cleanup list. Then not much happened until 1996. A study was done on the children in this area. 43% of kids tested positive for lead poisoning.
Lead accumulates in the body over time through a process called bioaccumulation. The process is irreversible and can cause damaging effects such as permanent neurological damage and learning disabilities. After that discovery, the United States Environmental Protection Agency spent $140 million to replace topsoil in the area. In 2000, a task force examined Pitcher's long-term prospects. The final report concluded that the town was unlivable and needed to be evacuated. The Army Corps of Engineers confirmed that 86% of Pitcher's buildings were dangerously undermined and the town was in danger of collapsing. The earth could swallow the town up at any time. In addition to that, a 2004 EPA Technical Assistance Grant funded study discovered that disease rates in the Pitcher area were 20 to 30% above average. Chronic lung disease was 2,000 times higher than anywhere else.
When I was in school was a time that they started tying the blood, that a little bit when I was younger, they started seeing the Pitcher kids having high blood lead levels. About the time I was about that age, junior high or so we're talking early 90s, they started tying it back to, they actually did a big campaign about washing your hands. Play outside, you wash your hands, because they found out, all these kids play. You send a kid outside to play, they're going to eat stuff without washing your hands. So just the fact of doing a really big campaign on washing their hands was able to reduce that. And that was all happening at night. So we had an idea of this.
This set off a mandatory evacuation in the year 2000. In 2005, only 52 residents were still in Picher with over 329 acres of toxic land. The state of Oklahoma approved a buyout. There were actual 52 buyouts that took place, and most people just left Picher. Devastation came again in 2008. It was an EF4 Oklahoma tornado. The tornado ripped through the center of town, flattening most of it. It destroyed 114 homes, 150 people were injured, and 8 lost their lives.
Pitcher was still a town until the tornado hit. I can't remember the exact year, but right in the midst of all that, when about half the town had moved, a large tornado ripped right through the center of town.
In 2005, the government approved a buyout to relocate 52 of the residents. Buyout offers started at $55 per square foot. Over the next several years, a few residents struggled to hold on to their small town. It wasn't until 2011 that the buyout was completed.
Pitcher's incorporation was canceled on June in 2009. The post office was the last business to close, and in early 2011 they demolished homes and businesses for the most part. Cardin was the first town in the area to completely close down. In late 2011, only one business and 6 people remained in Pitcher. Animals can't even live in this toxic place. Birds falling from the sky after flying around Chat and drinking contaminated water. And if that hasn't been punishment enough, in 2017, arson fire burned down that little church that you've seen so many pictures of. Also, the Pitcher Mining Museum was burnt to the ground. In 2014, the Quapaws wanted their land back, and they wanted to do the cleanup as well. It is said to take 30 years to clean up Pitcher, Oklahoma.
The government returned the toxic waste region or Tar Creek Superfund site to the Quapaw Indian tribe, who owned the land long before lead and zinc were discovered in Pitcher.
And in 2008, the EPA made a decision to start cleaning up the Chat. 2009, the tribe said, hey, we could do that. We could do the cleanup because, we have scientists and engineers. We have all the equipment. Why can't the tribe be in charge of the cleanup? So EPA agreed, and in 2014, the tribe took over a majority of the cleanup of the site. So the tribe's been doing cleanup, or has taken the lead on the cleanup of Tar Creek ever since. So to date, we've cleaned up a couple of, maybe 2 to 3 million tons of Chat, and every day we're just scooping it up and either putting it back down into the mine, or we're putting it in a giant repository that'll be capped eventually. But we're reclaiming this land that the tribe has, and we're putting it to good use. I mean, even when we take the Chat away, we can take the contaminated soil underneath, and then we can plant crops or graze cattle, or put it back to use, which is the tribe's ultimate goal. And there's a lot of positive things, but I mean, the tribe, understandably, is not just ecstatic about getting undermined, polluted land back, But I think the tribe's in the best position to make it something positive.
The Quapaw still own 80% of the Superfund site that includes Pitcher. After the government buyout, the land reverted to its original owners, and the Quapaw became the first tribe to manage a Superfund site cleanup.
And it was the first ever, teaming up of a tribe and the state to do Superfund cleanup. So not only was it first for the tribe to take the lead on the EPA Superfund side, we were the first tribe to team with a state to do cleanup, on state land. So, it's been, we had to develop a lot of new processes, a lot of oversight had to be established, but now that we're going and we've got these systems and oversights in place, it's been going very, very smoothly. So, I mean, everybody wins. EPA wins because they're getting efficient cleanup. Tribe wins because we're getting our land cleaned up and we're employing people locally. State wins because they're a lot cheaper for us to do it than hire their contractors. So, it's win-win for everybody.
About 30 million yards of Chat remain in Pitcher. On windy days, the toxic dust swirls around the decaying town. What's left of the high school still lies surrounded by mountains of Chat. The doors are boarded up, the windows are shattered, and the halls are coated in lead dust. The football field is overgrown, and sidewalks have been overtaken by weeds. Concrete slabs are there, but the homes that once rested on them are not.
Unfortunately, since the people have moved out, it's become kind of an attractive nuisance for wildlife. Wildlife, once people leave, wildlife comes back in, but they're being exposed at a higher rate than to heavy metals. So that's why it's really imperative that we continue the cleanup and expedite the cleanup, to get rid of the Chat in the streams and the Chat in the uplands and make sure that, those ecological receptors aren't being continuously exposed. But once the contaminants are removed, then we want wildlife to come back in. And it will. I mean, it already is. So the critical thing is to get rid of the pollution so the animals aren't being exposed as fast as we can.
It's the classic story of having everything and having nothing. The Quapaw got their land back, but it's polluted, toxic land that has to be cleaned up. But for the people who called Picher home, only have memories of a past life. But Picher really isn't a ghost town. Cleanup work is always going on, and the Quapaw police have a building out there and they're always patrolling. Anyway, I'm going to grab my camera and go to Picher and check it out, and then I will share it with you. So, hope to see you again for part 2 very, very soon. It's DJ Jamie Lynn, and I'm out.